In this presentation, we will take a look at Zoom Online Meeting. Zoom is a type of software similar to Skype where you can have online meetings. You can meet with people online. It's great for business meetings and setting up business meetings. It's great for tutoring. It's great for just meeting other people on personal type of meetings as well. And you can interact in different ways with something like a Zoom meeting. Now, there's a lot of other type of meeting softwares out there that you can use that work in a similar way. Zoom is the one I'm currently have experience with. It seems to be popular amongst like tutors, people that are doing tutoring, as well as meetings and meeting with other people as well. One of the main reasons it's pretty easy to use, and it's got a pretty substantial component for the free version. In other words, if you use just the free component of it, you have a pretty substantial amount of features just with that, and it's usually enough for most people's needs. So here's the Zoom site. You can type in zoom.com. I'm at zoom.us. I'm in the US. And so this is going to be their platform. Note they do have some items that are going to be specific to this current time period with the coronavirus and whatnot, including some offers for removing the 40-minute time limit for some accounts if you're involved in education and schooling for K-12. So that's, you might want to look into that and some of the more options they have. But in essence, we'll just go up to the pricing options here and think about the pricing options. Now we're going to be here in the basic options, which has, like I say, for most people, more than you really need. If you're just meeting with a few people, if you want to have a meeting with like one person to, a few people within the meeting, we have here host up to 100 participants. So that's pretty good that you can have multiple people within the meeting here. So unlimited one-to-one meetings. So we have unlimited one-to-one. Now the big catch is this 40-minute limit on group meetings. So if your meeting goes over 40 minutes, it's going to basically cancel out. And then you could try to log back in with the same account or possibly use someone else's account. If multiple people have an account, someone else could host the meeting or something like that. But that's going to be usually the restraining factor that they have here. But again, that's pretty good. So unlimited number of meetings, that's great. And ticket support, so you do have support with that. So then if you purchase, we got the $14.99 plan, and some of the big components there, of course, is going to be the meeting duration now being a limit at the 24 hours. And you can look over some of the other features. This is where, of course, we're going to be focusing in on here. Note that Zoom is kind of one of those areas that many people can be complete experts at, and there's kind of specialties within a Zoom meeting, whether you're doing very large meetings, a presentation type format, or where you're interacting with different people. Could be a different usage as well as just interacting with individuals and doing things like tutoring, whether that be one-on-one tutoring or smaller sizes of tutoring, like groups of 5 or 10 or something like that. The skill level of people using Zoom will change a lot too. So whether in those special areas, you'll have some people that are moving around and can go back and forth within Zoom, and it's kind of like watching an expert user of a phone of some kind, and everywhere in between in terms of the use of the software. But there's some nice things when you use a Zoom type of software and interact with other people, no matter what your level is. So we'll take a look at some of those items. So if we go back up top to the Zoom here, I'm going to go back to the home page. You can then sign up for the free trial. So the sign up process is pretty straightforward. You can sign up, put your basic information in that. You'll typically need, I believe, an email address in order to do that. You shouldn't need any payment information, no credit card information, however, in order to sign up for it. Now, to run the meeting, you'll typically have a software that is going to be downloaded. So you can have some kind of driver software that you will need to basically download to be running the meeting. Once you've signed up, when you go into Zoom, you'll then be signed in if you're memorized in your browser, and you can go into your sign-in profile. Now, once you're in your profile, it'll look something like this. You'll have the profile on the left. You can change your image here, and then you'll have kind of your default information. The default information will typically include a URL, and this is kind of like your default URL. So if you were to tell someone, this is your normal meeting room. So if you have some standard kind of meetings, you wanted to go to that URL, then you can have that as your standard meeting room, and you could provide that to other people. Remember how this kind of works. You're not really calling other people here. Typically, you're going to set the meeting up at a particular time, and then people will locate in that kind of location, which is going to be that URL. So you want to email that URL either now, or you can email it, as you start the meeting, or, call someone and tell someone, hey, meet at my standard URL here. Now, note that the standard URL is nice because it's once people have it, you could say, hey, that's the location. That's kind of like the location where you're going to be meeting. But it's going to be a little less secure that way if you're always using the same URL to go to the same basic meeting room. So just note that it's probably better when you're scheduling meetings, especially with clients or something like that, that you would be setting up using a different meeting. You'll set up another meeting. And you can use the item down here to schedule a meeting here, or you could schedule a meeting up top, and that takes you to pretty much the same location. So this one's going to be an easier thing to do. If someone knows your standard ID number or URL, they can go there. If you want to set up a more customized meeting for businesses and whatnot, then you typically would want to do that and have another URL. So user type, we have the basic type here. So that, again, free version that we're talking about. The capacity of the meeting was the 100. That's the version that we have. You could set up the language here. So English for me, we're going to set up the date and time. So you could set up the date and time information, and that could help for inviting people, calendar and contact, and then the sign-in password and so forth that you can change here as well. Now we might go through some more of the settings, but I want to just go in and just start the meeting and then take a look at it. So remember your objective here then. You want to give someone the URL so you can actually send them the URL by an email or something like that so they can click on it and go directly to the meeting page. Also, you can give them the sign-in, so a sign-in ID number as well, which you could think about as kind of like a phone number. And if you do that, if you give someone the phone number, because that would be easier to like text someone. You could say, hey, go to zoom.com and then join the meeting and enter this phone number into the meeting. So that would look something like this. So you can instruct someone else, even if they don't have an account, just go to zoom.com. I'm at zoom.us and then say join meeting. So then go into the join meeting and then you can enter that ID number, which you can think of like a phone number, and then they can join the meeting without even having an account with Zoom, and you can just basically text them the number in that case rather than giving them the URL. Now, of course, if you have an email, if they're emailing, then the URL is great because then they don't even have to go to Zoom. You don't have to give any other instructions other than just click on the email. So if you're doing an email, click on the email, here it is. If you're doing something by phone or text, then you say, hey, go to zoom.us, click on join meeting, and then type in basically this number, this ID number, like a phone type number. Now, when you're setting up the meeting, you can go to meetings here, and then you can go to the personal meeting room, and then you can start the meeting, and that'll take you to your personal meeting room, which is your custom URL, your normal new URL meeting room. And then, or you could basically just copy the URL that you have here, your normal URL, and put that in and paste it into the URL and hit enter, and then that'll join you to your meeting room as well. Now, you'll typically get a pop-up saying open Zoom meeting. You may have to download a software to be running this, to run Zoom as well. So it's going to be a driver in essence that will help to run the software. Now, before you join the meeting, you typically get something like this, and I highly recommend running through your testing here before you join the meeting, because it can be a little bit quirky. You got obviously 2 things at least involved, and possibly 3, and that being that you have to have the audio in some way. You need headphones or you need a speaker. Now, speaker's probably fine because it's low enough that it's not going to give the feedback. If you use the audio in the speakers, it's probably not going to give the feedback. However, it could. So headphones might be the better way to go there because, then you don't get the feedback from the speakers that go back into the microphone, causing a loop, So you want to test this and say test speaker and microphone. So it'll test one at a time. Now, when you do this, you can hear that. It'll give you a little, piano tune. You say, yeah, I can hear that. Great, it works. And then you'll test the microphone. You're going to talk into it, and it'll talk back to you. And if you can hear that, you say, yeah, that works. So then you can then join the meeting. You really want to check those 2, otherwise you spend time in the meeting going, oh, the microphone's not working or this or that. And so, that's the best way to do it. So then I would join, and I would typically say join with computer audio. So there we have it. Now, this is your basic dashboard that you have here. Now, you can if you have multiple screens, you might want to take, this dashboard, and put it on your other screen or something like that if possible. If not, no problem here. So it's going to have the invitation URL. You can quickly copy that if you so choose. If you're trying to invite someone and emailing them, you can copy that and send that out to them. Now the options down below then, we have join the audio, share the screen, and invite others. Now here, if you have the audio, it's going to give you your audio test again. So if you needed to test that, you can take a look at that. The invitation, if you close this back up, the invitation is going to be, you can copy the invitation, copy the URL, and basically email out that information. I'm going to close that back up. We'll go into the screen in a second. Also note that you have your information bar down below. So this is going to give you your information. You want to check your mic over here, of course. You can also check the participants quickly. Now the mic here, you can see the little green icon moving. That means that it's working in essence. So that's good. And then you can select the drop up in this case and see the settings for the microphone. Also note that you can take this bar here and you can put it in different areas. You can put it up top. You can put it down below. I kind of like it having it down below because if it's up top, then when you're using things, it gets in the way of navigating between multiple panes and multiple windows. So I typically like having it on the bottom here. And so then we've of course got the video settings. So if you have the camera and you're going back and forth with the video, you could set up the video as well, which is really nice, but it can also be a little bit confusing because it's just another option. If you're sharing something and presenting something, then and you're moving around the video. In other words, if you're doing this in a meeting type of format and you're saying, hey, look at this PowerPoint or something like that, then to me, it's easier to have less components. Otherwise, the more components you have, the more bouncing around you're going to do, the more difficult it is. And so if you're starting out, I would start slow and say, it's just this, I'm just showing you this thing. And then as you build up, you'll get to working a lot faster. And also working with other people. If you're jumping back and forth from other people's screens and back to your screen and whatnot, it really depends on the skill level of the other person as well as to how fast you can go back and forth. We have the invitation here, so the invite, the managing people. So you got, and then you have the one participant can share at a time, multiple participant. I would think one, is what I typically use. And then you've got the chat. And some people like having the chat open all the time so that you can chat with, other people and have the chat open on the screen. Again, just note that of course it takes up space on the screen. The more things you have on the screen, it takes up space. So you got to move them around. The more things you have, the more complicated it gets to navigate this thing. And then you can record the meeting over here as well. So you can actually use this as a screen capture tool as well if you so choose. I think there's other tools out there that are better if you just want to make recordings of the screen, but recordings of a meeting, talking to someone, that could be useful. You can end the meeting on the right as well. Now on the audio options, let's just take a look at those real quick here. You're going to choose the microphone that you have. So if you have a problem with the audio, you want to make sure that it's picking the correct audio system. The speakers, you can again select which speakers that you want. It could be very possible you have multiple types of speakers. If you plug the headphones in, then you can have multiple speakers. You want to make sure that you're using the correct speaker settings. Okay, so then let's go into some of the items here. If you went in to say share screen, which is going to be a common type of setting, and this is something that could be useful even if you're just basically even if you had two people that are in the same room. You can imagine the added thing that this could give to someone within a conversation. So if you had two people in the same room and they're working on two different computers or two different laptops and they could still talk to each other, well, you can still imagine they might want to share and say, hey, look at this, look at this video, or look at this page, or look at this article. And instead of emailing the article or the URL, they could just say, hey, here's, share my screen, here's the screen, and they can then see that information. So if we were to share the screen in this fashion, we're going to say, all right, share the screen. Then, the other person can share the screen here, and then you could go to things and note when I go back up top to the URL up top, I can now hit the URL and this little thing doesn't get in the way. That's why I like having it on the bottom here, because if it's on the top and I'm trying to navigate through windows and I'm showing people something on here, then it gets a little bit more difficult to navigate. But then you could go in here and you could and show people different things on this item. Now notice if you're showing a video, if you went to like a Netflix or whatever, a YouTube video or something like that, it also has an audio feature, so which is going to be really useful. because oftentimes when you're using software like this, you're showing the display, but you don't want it to have the computer audio go through because that could be confusing, right? So typically the computer audio is off, but if you're watching a video, then you want someone else to hear the audio. So then you can hit, if you go to the drop down, you go to more, you could say share the computer sound. And that allows you to allow the other participant to hear the computer audio. So you can actually sit there and, watch a movie together or something like that, or watch something together in that format. So that can be a useful tool. Items in here, of course, we have the chat, we have the invite in here, record. You could disable the participant annotations. And then another nice tool, if you're working with someone else, you could say, hey, I don't know where to go on something. And you can say, I can show them my screen and tell them, I don't know where it is. You say it's here, and then you can actually give them, you can say, hey, give them control. This is my other person test. Give control of my mouse to them. And then they can actually navigate the screen for you and find it. So you can have your screen that they can see, and then they can navigate the screen from their location. Then we also have the annotations. You can put in the annotations, so you can write basically on the screen and so on and so forth. You got your information up top, so you have the mouse, you have the select. If you want to put text in here, you can just simply put text in here as well. You can have the drawing tools and whatnot, so you can experiment with that. If you want to erase anything or undo, you can hit undo, or you can use the good old eraser here as well and erase the text. So that can be useful a lot of times with teaching and things like that. If you want to draw on you can then pause it here. We have the managing of the participants. So if you go into the participants here, you can then give someone else the control. So what if you wanted to then say you have a couple participants, you want to say, I'd like to give them the control of the system so that maybe we could see their computer, right? So we have a chat. You can typically do like one-on-one chats during a meeting as well. So if you had a meeting of like 10 people, you can theoretically chat with one person within the meeting or something like that. And you can change the settings like that. You can make them the host. So again, that's how you can kind of jump back and forth. So you can say, all right, take a look at this article. And the other person can say, well, I have something interesting on that I was looking at the other day. Why don't you make me the host? And then you could take a look at my screen and I'll show you what I have over here. And so again, you can even imagine that happening with two people in the same room, where they don't have to, basically share the same, pass me the computer, get out of the chair so I can see it. You have a group of people hovering over one computer. You can imagine them saying, okay, you can see my screen, jump over to this other screen, like 5 people in the same room sharing the same information. That's a little bit more difficult because it takes people on both sides, that kind of understand how to be jumping back and forth from one component to another. And I'm not claiming to be a complete expert on that here either. So, but I do use that with business settings and tutoring, and it does work well. So that's going to be those screens. Now, if I go to a new share, so let's take a look at the other item. Another useful tool is the whiteboard. So that just gives you something that you can basically write on. So a lot of people like to just have something to write on, just a blank slate, something to write on here. And of course, you've got the pen that you could be writing with. It's a little bit difficult to write with a mouse and whatnot, but then you have the text, which is nice. So you can be applying the text out and then just type something in for the text just straight on the whiteboard. And we saw these features you can do on other screens as well, but it's nice to just have it on the whiteboard. You've got your spotlight that you can have here, so it could spotlight for your pointer purposes, and then the format, the undo, same kind of text field. So now I'll take a look a little bit at the options. So you can jump right into this, and these are basically the default settings. Let's take a little bit of a look at some of the options, the other types of options we have. So now we're back to our settings screen here. So if we go back into just our settings, we have the personal settings that we took a look at. Then we have more settings down below, capacity 100, because we have, the free version here, language, English. You got the settings that we took a look at last time. Now we're in the meetings, and we're in the upcoming meetings. Now this is where you can actually schedule a meeting. So you can actually schedule the meeting. And again, this is probably the better thing to do than always using your set URL, unless you're just using that with a select group of people. But if you're meeting people outside your normal group of people, then you would probably want to set the meeting, and then you can have a meeting down here, and then it'll have its own meeting ID. So you could say, hey, here's a meeting ID. Just go to Zoom meeting, put in the meeting ID number, or you can give them the URL as an email, and that'll link to them directly. So you can go to the meetings here and schedule those meetings. And again, that's the better way to do it. Again, if you're outside of your circle, your normal circle, that's probably what you want to be doing. And then the meetings, if you have My Meeting and go into the meeting, this is just kind of the information you can put in the topic, the description. You can say when the meeting is and set the duration of it and whatnot so people can be aware of that. You have the meeting ID, which you can generate automatically, or you can have a personal meeting ID. So you can toggle over if you want some kind of personal meeting ID. And then the meeting password will be down below. And then video on, off, meeting options, enable, join before meeting. So these are a little kind of tricky. I mean, typically if you're going to say, hey, I want you to be here at meet at this particular point in time, it's kind of nice if they could join before the meeting. So you might want to check that off just in case you get, something happens and you get there a little bit late. So they can just be hanging out at the meeting room, right? So they can join before the meeting. Mute participants participants upon entry. So note just like if they're going to join before the meeting, it's kind of nice if they could talk to each other if the host isn't there yet. But at the same time, maybe you just would rather just, because then when you go into the meeting, you're going to have to break up whatever conversation is there and start or whatever. So maybe it's easier to just say, hey, mute it, have them join the meeting, mute it until the participant gets there or whatnot. So you can experiment with those settings to make the start of the meeting as easy as possible. And enable the waiting room, so you can have a waiting room here, which is another option. Again, you can experiment with that if you're meeting with multiple people. Record the meeting automatically on the local computer. So that's going to take up a lot of space to record the meetings, but maybe if you have a set meeting you're setting up all the time and you're saying, hey, I want to make minutes on this meeting, I want to have a record of this meeting, then that would be a nice setting to have as well. So My Meeting, manage My Meeting. So the topic, you have, My Meeting topic, you have the time, the meeting ID, and the meeting password information, as well as the URL. So now, again, if you want to give the personal meeting for your personal ID, remember that's under meetings, and then you can go over here to the personal meeting room, and that'll use your personal URL meeting room. You can also just copy the URL. It'll be right in your profile as well. Then you can read some more options related to the webinars and related to recording, so you can look into that yourself. I'll just take a look at the settings real quick. And so if we go through the settings, we've got the host video start meeting with host on. And so these are the default settings that are currently here. Participants, well, most of them are the default setting. Participants video start meeting with participant video on, so you can select those on or not. Audio type, determine how participants can join the audio portion of the meeting. When joining audio, you can let them choose to use the computer microphone, speaker, or telephone. So I think it's easier to use the computer, and there's currently kind of issues with the telephone because there's a lot of usage. So at this point in time, it might be nice if everyone was using the computer. Also, you have the feedback kind of issues when there's multiple items being used. But in any case, you can give that option as well, the default telephone and computer audio. Join before host, allow participants to join the meeting before the host. So you could set this as a default to have that on by default to allow them to join before the host is there. Use personal meeting ID when scheduled meeting. So you can visit the personal meeting room to change your personal meeting settings. So use personal meeting ID when starting an instant meeting. And then require password when scheduling new meetings. So a password will be generated when scheduling a meeting, and participants require the password to join the meeting. So rather than just having the ID number, they're going to need a password as well. Require a password for instant meetings. Require a password for personal meeting IDs. Embed password in meeting link for one-click join. So now you have a password, but it's in the link, so they can click it on one click and still get in there. Even though you have a password. Require password for participants joining by phone, and mute participant upon entry. So do you want to mute it or not? Upcoming meeting reminders. Require encryption for third-party endpoints. You have the chat options, the private chat options allow meeting participants to send one-on-one messages to another participant. So if you got like a bunch of people in there, can they talk and exclude other people from their side chat within the meeting? Auto saving chats. So you could save the chats, and again, that could be used for if you want to make notes or minutes of the meeting. Play sound when participants join or leave, and that could be useful to know when people are going into the meeting or not. You get a little sound saying, hey, they've joined the meeting or not. Feedback to Zoom. Display end of meeting experience feedback survey. So you can actually have a survey for the meeting experience. Again, that could be a useful tool if you have minutes and are trying to record the meeting information. Allow host to put attendee on hold. Always show meeting control toolbar. Show Zoom windows during screen share. Screen sharing. Allow host and participants to share their screen or contact during meetings. So who can share, host only or all participants, who can start sharing when someone else is sharing, host only. Disable desktop screen share for users. Annotation, allow participants to use annotation tools to add information to the shared screens. Then you have the whiteboard settings, allow participants to share whiteboard during the meeting. Remote control. During screen share, the person who is sharing can allow others to control the shared content. So that's kind of nice. So then you don't have to go to someone else's screen. You could say, hey, I'm giving you control of the current, presentation we have here. Nonverbal feedback. Participants in a meeting can provide nonverbal feedback and express opinions by clicking icons. Allow removed participants to rejoin. And break rooms, so you could set the break room. Allow hosts to split meeting participants into separate smaller rooms. Again, this gets a little bit more complex, so once you get good at this, you can start experimenting with these settings and breaking up meetings into smaller rooms. So you can think about like a classroom. If you had a classroom, you say, oh, we got 30 people here now, and now we're going to break up into groups of 5 or whatever, and then we're going to come back into the main meeting room. You could do that virtually, but it gets a little bit more complex. You gotta experiment with that. Remote support. Allow meeting host to provide one-on-one remote support. Closed captioning. Allow host to type closed captions or assign a participant. Save captions. Allow participants to save fully closed captions. Far end camera control. Virtual feedback. Allow users to replace their feedback with any selected image. Identify guest participants in the meeting or webinar. Auto answer group in chat. So enable users to see and add contacts to auto answer group in contact list on chat. Only show default emails when sending email invites. Use HTML format email for Outlook plugin, so it might be better to use the HTML sometimes. Allow users to select stereo audio in their client settings. Allow users to select original sound. Waiting room. Attendees cannot join meeting until a host admits them individually from their waiting room. So that can help you to kind of manage the meeting. Show a join from your browser link. So email notifications when attendees join the meeting, when a meeting is canceled, and then the blur, snapshot, invitation, email, and so on and so forth. So you have a whole lot of settings that you could jump into. You can see why I kind of went on the default first, and then you can go in there and experiment with those settings. Then you have the recording, so you can take a look at the recording options as well and look at those settings and the telephone settings. I won't go into those in more detail. That's just my overview of the use of Zoom.